Hey guys, I'm Nathan Masters from Brick System Brothers, and I'd like to show you a new MOC that I have put together. And this is just a small little space MOC. I wasn't trying to be really detailed with this one, but I did have the space building bug, and I wanted to get something together. So when it comes to naming models, I usually try to make something up so that I don't have kind of ties to anything else. If I'm building in like within the Star Wars franchise, then I can kind of look to that for inspiration, but this guy is kind of just my own little deal. It's not really supposed to fit in with a franchise, and so I've given it kind of its own name called the Klatz VC. And so Klatz is just kind of a made-up company, and then VC stands for Venture Craft here, where it's just kind of a little one-seater module spacecraft, and I can even go further and call this one the Mars edition because of that orange detail on here. So, and we'll look at that in a second with my info card that I made up. And now this one didn't really have a specific inspiration, but I would say I do tend to start with a couple of large pieces if I have those laying around and I know that I want to use it. And so kind of the seed part, if you will, for this model is this 6x6. Oh, I don't know what you would call it, kind of like a cockpit canopy section. So I've actually used it kind of inverted to the way it's designed. So our anti-studs are usually on the bottom, but in this case I've made that into the back and have it hinge open from the top. And the whole thing is also at a slight angle with respect to the rest of the build. It's hard to see with the black, but I was able to kind of assemble this using a hinge clip down here at the bottom, and that has allowed me to put a really interesting angle into the build. So my actual physical build model here is not very color coordinated, although I do have this orange-red theme on this side, pretty coherent. The other side I wanted to be more toned down and darker, so I've actually got the orange hose here and the silver hose here, so two different color hoses. Similar thing with the engines, where I've got the orange engine from Mars mission paired with a black engine that's just used as a regular tire. And then other details as well, including kind of this engine assembly here, has been done in different colors on alternating sides. Now the front, I would have liked to make this side black and this side orange, or possibly the whole thing black across the front, but I didn't spend a lot of time digging through my slopes to find matching ones. So the yellow ones were on top, those are the ones that got used. And then just one final note with the colors is the blue canopy is one of two colors that I have, and it's the best option for this model. The other one is a neon green, but my preference for this model would be to use a trans black canopy, which does exist, but I just don't have one. Other than that, you may notice some similarities on the front here. I do like to use these 1x1 round tiles for headlights, so those have found their way in here right behind the hose attachment. And then our front grille is kind of similar to my Carabin build, where I'm using these 1x2 slopes with that grille pattern on there, just to give a little more character and detail to the model. I'll look at some of the techniques here in a minute, but I want to feature my studio version of this build. So let's look at that real quick. So here's the studio model, and it didn't take too long to put together, especially since I build my studio models pretty much entirely after my physical models built, just so that I know that way I don't really have any connectivity issues and everything is pretty stable. So that's just helpful for me to have the physical model complete, and then the studio model is what I use to get all of the colors correct. And I did put some effort into making sure that everything I've used in this model is actually produced by LEGO at some point in an official set. And so this trans black canopy, it was produced, but it was only in one set. And so that's actually the most expensive piece. Let's go ahead and check that out real quick with our model info. And when we want to sort it by price, we can see that this trans black canopy is a $3 piece. So at some point in the future, if I come across one of these, I would definitely swap it in. I actually don't know how long I'm going to keep this thing together, but it is just kind of a just for fun model. But yeah, Bricklink Studio is a good way to see how much this would actually cost me to build in the preferred colors. So you'll notice right away in the studio model that I haven't placed the hoses in, and that's kind of the biggest problem, the biggest issue. One of the only issues I've had with Studio is there's no way to, within this application, position these hoses. So there is a way to do it through LDraw, which is a little more involved, and even Digital Designer had some tools to help you place flex hoses, but Studio just doesn't have that kind of feature. I've put them here on the side to give me an accurate parts count, and it's not 70 pieces because I have some submodels used. It is actually, let's open this up again, 97 pieces and 74 different lots. So a couple of duplicates, that kind of thing. But this is able to give me the price estimate, which is about $20. So if you were to go on Bricklink right now and buy all the pieces that I would need to build this, it would cost about $20. I wouldn't necessarily buy all of them because most of them I do have, but it's just nice to know how much something is worth. And of course, if you want to build this, I would recommend finding the color alternatives that don't cost as much. So there's that. But the other reason I build my models in Studio is so that I can export them with a render, which I've talked about in my tutorial. But the render is pretty good functionality wise, and it gives you pretty nice results. So here's the photoreal render, and yeah, basically it just takes the model and renders it as if it was a picture of that in like a light box. And so pretty much everything that we were seeing on screen earlier is here, just in the colors that I prefer, except of course the hoses are not in place because those aren't able to be placed. And then so the other thing I did was I threw together this info card, and yeah, it just has some information that I like to add, just kind of imaginary stuff. Manufacturer would be this company called Klatz, Yard and Hanger, and some other stuff like maybe you would see this on the Ultimate Collector series, those little placards that are included. So that kind of thing, I do like to do that for my MOCs, add a little story to it. So that's fun. That's kind of all I wanted to show with this, with Studio and then these renders. I did actually make 4 renders, so the isometric here and then the side, front, and top view to kind of give it this drafty look here. And if you want to look at this and download it, it's on my Flickr, so I'll drop that link in the description. Yeah, so coming back to our model now, I did want to mention a couple techniques, and of course the first one being this sloped kind of angled build with this canopy piece. And so that is a pretty small connection considering the size of the rest of the model. It's only actually connected at this 1x2 plate point with these hinge plates. But what I've done to combat the smaller connection is I've added kind of 2 points of contact. So in the front it can't rock forward because it hits the front of this slope right here, and on the back it can't rock back because it hits this slope behind the engine piece. So once this is locked in on this bar clip, it doesn't really go anywhere because it's like fixed in place. And if you have a bigger model, you might want to add some more connection points, but this is a pretty small model, and so it holds together pretty well. For the engines, I did have to deal with that slope again, where I wanted them to be more aligned with the center of mass, but this is a little bit shallow, so it puts it up a little high. And so I wanted to be able to put the engines on a pivot so that it could angle down and kind of position the craft. And so what I ended up doing was using these, uncover it here, these very beneficial socket pieces, maybe from Bionicle back in the day, and we're able to use this socket receiver with the ball socket piece that can accept a Technic axle right there. And what that lets you do is basically build kind of a custom engine assembly, and then that whole thing can just be attached back onto the model. And now with the specific orientation of this one, I do have that up and down that I wanted, but I have a much larger lateral side to side. So you can start to see this would be maybe like an aerobatic vehicle or craft, like a racer. You can make really sharp turns with these engines, just kind of boosting that tail end around a really large moment arm about the center of mass, like that. And we do have a couple of fins on here for stability. Once you get going a couple 100 miles an hour, every little surface counts, and so that's going to give you some steering. And the reason that I have added the hoses, and I appreciate what this brings to the model, is just kind of the curvature that you don't really get from system bricks. These angles work out really well in system, and this canopy is older, so it does have this kind of blocky trapezoidal feel to it, and so kind of balancing that with the curvature of the hoses has kind of helped this model find a balance in between the blocky and the more graceful slopes. So the last thing to do is show you guys our pilot minifigure positioning, and there's not a whole lot too difficult about this one. Again, since I've kind of changed the orientation of the pod of the capsule, this opens from the top, so really easy to access. And then the other thing you have to do is position the hands a little bit so that it can sit down all the way in there. And so to do this, I'm using some jumpers down on the bottom, and those will attach to the last two anti-studs on the legs. And then it's actually a reclined kind of position in here, where our pilot can just kind of sit back and relax. It has like a spacious feel to the cockpit, but also somewhat compact. So now we just close this down, and that goes right in front of the hands there. And the reason, again, going back to these engines, that I wanted to have them point down is so that when you're traveling in the forward direction, you do have that visibility out of the front. Because when you start to slope it back like this, it's kind of right at the line of sight, and it's almost like you're just looking straight up instead of flying forward. So helps with that a little bit. And yeah, I wish I had that other color canopy to kind of make this more visible from the outside, but blue does the job good enough. And I like incorporating these older system elements into newer builds. That's a lot of fun for me. So that's the Klatz VC. Again, Klatz just kind of a made-up manufacturer. The VC standing for Venture Craft. And then this specific color that is actually more, you can see that better in my renders in my studio model with the black and the orange. That's just being our Mars edition here. So kind of has a little more oomph and could be like a racer model there. But yeah, just the side of adding like the details and the backstory to a model is really enjoyable for me, and I like to put that out there when I share my creations and my content. So thanks for watching, guys. I do like to put these MOC videos in with the other content that we do here on Brick System Brothers, and hopefully I'll have some actual instruction vids coming out pretty soon. That Carabin hover car, I have made some instructions for that, and so kind of looking at getting that produced here in the future. But this one's only 97 pieces, so it wouldn't be too hard to do a little tutorial. If I do that, I will throw in a card here in the corner and link it down below as well. So keep an eye out for that one, guys, and we'll see you next time on Brick System Brothers.